Right, UFC 301 for me, it weren't even that bad, but I don't know what was worse, the crowd or Steve Erceg's corner. They were giving him the wrong illusion in his brain, thinking that he was losing that fight, when a lot of people had it 3-1 for him going into that fifth round. I don't know what his coaches were watching. How can you score that fight 49-46 Pantoja when the majority of time, yes, he landed a few body shots, which was slowing Erceg down at times, but even when he landed these body shots, you'll see in Steve Erceg, especially when they're in the pocket, landing these like sneaky elbows over the top. And not only that, when they're striking in the pocket, so many times in the fight, I was seeing Steve Erceg counter him with a left hook. And the thing with Pantoja is, his striking has never been that good. His striking's very predictable. All it is blitzing forward, head down, throwing a bunch of overhands. And he gasses himself out early in every single fight. And I think when he comes up against a guy who has got very good cardio and can't be taken down, he's going to struggle heavily, because I believe that Steve Erceg, it's not a robbery. I'm not going to sit here and say that. If it was, I would. But it's not. But I think, in my opinion, if I was scoring that, he just won 48-47. For example, in the first round, Steve Erceg was getting used to it. That is the one round where we're all like, yeah, that's a clear Pantoja. He was landing on the chin clean, fighting like a caveman or whatever. But that's what he does. Clay Guida style, coming out, head down forward. But it's just a bunch of overhands. And Steve Erceg, using fight IQ, which we didn't see in round 5, was beginning to read it, because he hasn't got too good head movement. He is known for taking a lot of shots on the chin, but in this fight, I think his footwork was carrying him a lot, because you were seeing him roll with the punches very well, which is why you had Pantoja missing and actually catching him on the shoulder. So I do believe that the only good shots that Pantoja was landing were the shots that he was landing to the body. And occasionally he might land one strike to the head. And the rounds we've got to look at specifically, round 3, because round 2, although Pantoja's trying to like initiate grappling, I'm sorry, no, that's not enough. Because one thing about Pantoja with his grappling, I don't see enough ground and pound from him. It's a lot of like controlling, looking for submission attempts. But in this fight, I don't think there was one time where he got that rear naked choke underneath the neck and started to get that bicep squeeze. I don't remember that. That did not happen, because he did not get any deep submission attempts. He got attempts, but they weren't deep. So I'm not going to sit there and be like, right, because he did that after getting peppered in his chin, that he won that fight or won that round. No. It doesn't work like that. But he has got a good way of grabbing your back, seat belting you, pulling you down to the ground. Like, the takedowns are good. But look at the bunch of people who are saying that Sean Strickland against Duplessis kind of reminds me a bit like that fight, to be fair. We're like, oh, but takedowns don't mean anything if he didn't do damage. Because Steve Erceg, although he was held down at times on the ground, if you actually go back to round 3, you will see that Pantoja did not even land. Okay, that's wrong. He landed one strike on the ground, but it wasn't like a heavy one. It was like a light tap when he was trying to transition on the ground. And you think because of that, he won that 3rd round? When you had Steve Erceg, I'm not just saying it because he made him bleed with that elbow, because even if he didn't, in my opinion, them left hook counters, him moving out the way with the footwork, that was winning him that round. And that is why I'm confused to why they gave Pantoja it. But then again, no, that's a hypocrite of me, because I can see the argument if you're talking about with grappling, but striking, no, because he did not outstrike him. I don't know who was counting them significant strikes. I really don't. Because I believe they counted the shots that scuffed the chin as significant strikes. I really do. I think something about that was wrong. Because anyway, even if he did throw more strikes, who had the more powerful strikes? The damage was not even in that round. Yes, Pantoja didn't look like he was rocked, but you could see his chin taking, like, you could see the thud when he was eating that left hook and when he was eating the elbows. And that's what I'm on about. And we don't even need to talk about round 4, but I'm going to do it anyway. Because in round 4, that was as clear as day. You could see that elbow from the previous round hurt him. because he was now just backpedaling. He wasn't even looking to shoot in as much until later on. And then whilst he was on the back foot, he was just eating jabs. And the reason why Steve Erceg bottled it, we all know this, is because for some reason, I don't know why he did this. I still sit here and I'm like, why would you do that in a fight where you look like you could be on the verge of winning? But maybe he didn't think he was winning, so he was just trying to be desperate because his coach, I'm sorry, as technical as they were about, oh, you need to do this in the fight, that was a very low IQ move to tell the fighter that you're losing this fight 3-1. Fair enough, say you're losing, but don't sit here and say you're probably losing 3-1. Like, what were you watching? It's like they were favouring the grappling over the striking of Erceg. They really were. Because they were thinking Pantoja was winning, and I was like, no way. No way. Because, like I said before, some people might argue this. I have to disagree, though, that in round 5, Steve Erceg won on damage. Because what he did was strike and put Pantoja on the back foot until he got the takedown. But my argument against that is, as soon as that takedown happens, Erceg hasn't landed anything that's like massive in that round. They're going to be like, oh, the damage is even, plus we're in Brazil, so who are the coaches? Not coaches, I keep saying that. Who are the judges going to favour at that point? The Brazilian crowd. Not crowd, fighter. And that's what they did. So it's not a robbery, but I think a lot of people will be picking Erceg to have won that fight than Pantoja. Well, no, I can't say that. But maybe I could. I need to look at the polls. But from what I saw in that fight, I am very confident that Steve Erceg won that fight. But at the end of the day, he bottled that for himself. Because even if it was even, he ruined it by going for a takedown. And he's so experienced, and I just don't get why he was doing it. Because if your striking is better than the opponent and you're landing on him, why do you feel the need to mix up a takedown when each time they've gone to the ground, he's losing the battle, for example? Because Pantoja's got very good reversals, very good control. For grapplers out of all the champions, he's one of the best. He's probably top 2 when we're talking about control. Like, he controls people with ease and people don't just get up. It's so hard for an opponent to get up. Like, he did it to Brandon Royval, and I'm starting to think the next opponent, for me, that I would give to Steve Erceg is probably a Brandon Royval. I really want to see a rematch between Pantoja and Davison Figueiredo, but obviously that can't happen now because he's moved up to bantamweight. But now they've pushed Steve Erceg front up in line, we're probably going to have to look at... I don't want to see a rematch with Royval and Pantoja. We need a new person. Otherwise, it's just going to be rinse and repeat over and over and over again. So for the fighter who's next in line, it's probably going to have to be Amir Albazi. It's the fight... I know it doesn't seem too interesting on paper, but that's the fight that's got to be made now. He needs a title shot. He's been waiting a long time now. He just beat Kai Kara France. Robbery, by the way. But apart from that fight, he deserved the title shot. So that will probably be next, whether we want to see it or not. I'd like to see him against Cap, but that ain't going to happen. Because I still believe Figueiredo is a dangerous opponent, especially with the way that he can just come forward with those straight punches. With the way Pantoja blitzes in, he could actually get knocked out in a fight like that. Even though I believe he's one of the most underrated champions, in my opinion, he lost to Steve Erceg. So, yeah. Jose Aldo against Jonathan Martinez. This was like free money when I was looking at that fight. And thank God Jose Aldo won that fight because I never thought he was finished. I did make a video saying he's not fully retired yet. And he did say he'd go into boxing, which he did. And the boxing has actually improved him as a fighter because we do know now that Jose Aldo, he does not throw as many leg kicks as he used to. And Jonathan Martinez, what does he want to do? He wants to go out there and leg kick his opponent. But with Aldo's experience, he's not going to get them reads on him like he could do to like an Adrian Yanez, who was a flat-footed boxer who can't check leg kicks and should probably be in BKFC or do something like that, because when he comes up against a guy with leg kicks, he's going to struggle. Not only that, I just think with Adrian Yanez, he had a good start to his UFC career, but it's taking a slight dip right now. And he's not finished, but I'm just saying it'd be better if if it was in like a BKFC or something like that, I think, where you can trade in the pocket. But anyways, Jose Aldo against Jonathan Martinez. What I liked about him more than he used to do is he's moving his head more. I didn't think of Jose Aldo as a guy who completely moves his head off the centre line, but it's the boxing training that's doing that for him. And leading off with his hook, leading off with strikes, which boxers do, like that cross straight to the body. Jonathan Martinez, he looked lost out there. He didn't know what to do. He was very patient. He was waiting for Aldo so he could counter, but his counters weren't working. The only good thing I'd say he did early on was use a leg kick early, which, again, Aldo was trying to teep, but he could definitely feel a bit of it when those leg kicks were going through, even though he tried to teep it. But they didn't do enough, because when you look at the other opponents, he will use them a lot more. And you could see that Jonathan Martinez was finished. When you have a guy who loves the leg kick, trying to clinch, looking at the clock at times, you know he doesn't want to be there. And I'm joking, I don't know if you don't want to be there, but he did not look too good for me. 30-27 against Aldo isn't bad, but I'm just shocked how all of the bookmakers had Aldo as an underdog, because the only loss that he had as of recent was Merab Dvalishvili. And if you look at that loss deep down, what did Merab do in that fight? He hugged him against the cage. He didn't outstrike him. It wasn't a thing where Jose Aldo looked finished. And that's what I'm saying. Like, he has looked good in most of his fights at bantamweight. And the fact that he's even doing it at bantamweight at 37 just doesn't look normal, because he shouldn't be able to perform like that. And we all wanted to see, Jonathan Martinez, no, not Jonathan Martinez, Dominic Cruz against Aldo. But I believe that's the fight to still make. But I know it's not going to happen. I don't think Cruz wants it. I really don't. I don't know what he's doing. I think he's semi-retired. He'll take a fight against a guy like... I don't know. I can't even pick anymore, because I don't know what Cruz is doing with like fighting anymore. I've got no idea. But Aldo's going to break straight back into the rankings. And a good opponent for him to fight. I don't want to see one which we've already seen. But an interesting one would be like a Song Yadong against Jose Aldo. I think that would be very interesting, because one, Song Yadong carries extreme levels of power. And I noticed one thing with Aldo. Although Aldo was like piecing him up in every round, one thing that we worry about him is cardio. And not only cardio, but his chin at times. And there was a moment in the fight where I thought he was out on his feet for like a few seconds, but he was still in the fight. It wasn't a thing where he got completely rocked, but it was like a slight blip in the fight. And I believe if you do that against a guy like Song Yadong, that is extremely dangerous, because Aldo holds like that really tight guard to his head. If you come up against a guy who's a hooker, not like that. Not like that. But like a hooker in terms of he leads off with his hook and level changes into it, and you're holding your guard very tight to your head. A guy like Song Yadong poses a massive threat to Jose Aldo. I know you might think that sounds stupid after he lost to Petr Yan, but that was because Petr Yan was mixing up the grappling as well. But if you really want to push him back into the mix, I think that's the type of fight we should do, because Song Yadong hits extremely hard. Like, he was hurting Yan with strikes. He didn't knock him down, but he was hurting him. And I think he has got the power to knock out a guy like Jose Aldo. That's a fight where I think if they fought, it makes sense to make Aldo the underdog in a fight like that, even though he's coming off this win, compared to a fight with Martinez where Aldo should have always been the underdog. No, not Aldo. Martinez should have always been the underdog. Song Yadong, I can see that being quite even in a 3-round fight I'm on about. 5 rounds, I'm not even joking, that favours Song Yadong because of his cardio, the age. That is a dangerous fight. He can grapple. So he's not going to take down Jose Aldo, because I believe his takedown defense is really good. Like, you saw him out there throwing Martinez to the ground and using grappling at the end. Don't think you can do that to a Song Yadong, but I think it'll be a proper striking battle. You've got Song Yadong with a chin. That is a very hard fight for Aldo stylistically. And I think that's the fight I want to see next for Jose Aldo. And for Jonathan Martinez, Mario Batista. That's the type of fight I want to see. Last minute, even though I picked Petrino in my predictions, I was like, hang on a minute. Victor Petrino is not actually that good. he is pretty much like Waldo Cortez Acosta of light heavyweight in terms of he's not that good as a fighter. He's very basic, but he's probably got a better skill set than Waldo Cortez Acosta because he can do a bit of jiu-jitsu and he can bully people with size. But he makes very low IQ decisions. Not just because he got submitted by Anthony Smith. I'll tell you another moment with what he did. What was his name? Oh, that Swedish guy. Anton Tekalaji. He went out there and looked to grapple against him. Yes, he won the fight, but he was clinching a lot. And we know that Anton Tekalaji has got semi-good jiu-jitsu. And if you're doing that against a guy like that, eventually, if you keep grappling with guys who are good at jiu-jitsu, when you are meant to be a striker who can bully people with your size and power, it's going to happen. And it was just one of the dumbest things I've seen by Petrino. He ruined a lot of people's parlays and accas because heavy favourite. Anthony Smith, I did get a little bit on him by submission because they priced that way too high. Like, if Smith was going to win that fight, for me, it would have been by submission or decision. He ain't going to knock out Petrino. Petrino can take a punch, but Petrino also makes the low IQ moves. And the reason I'm saying Smith is still done, yes, he just beat Victor Petrino. But again, Victor Petrino is very basic. He's up and coming. This is a good fight for Anthony Smith because he encourages grappling. We know that Anthony Smith has got good jiu-jitsu. If you shoot in and leave your chin wide open with what he did, there is so many chances for him to lock up a submission. And we saw it happen. Like, he didn't even need to take him down. Like, with Smith, we've had a lot of times in fights where he's needed to take someone down and take their back. But people are forgetting that even off his back, he's dangerous. He, at heart, should use his jiu-jitsu more. Like, on the feet, he actually looked quite bad and slow. Like, he was trying to throw a hook to counter Petrino every minute because you could see that Petrino, he was fighting like Eddie Hall. And if you've watched Eddie Hall fight in that boxing match he had with that 4 strongman, he was loading up on that right hand. Like, you could see it was coming from a mile away. He was kind of like twitching with his right hand, turning, letting him know, right, I'm going to hit you with this right cross, right overhand. And it looked like it was about time until he was going to get caught with it. But Victor Petrino using low IQ, like, oh my God, I can't land this right hand. What am I going to do now? Oh, instead of looking to use my jab and set up my right hand, I'm going to go out there and try and grapple with him and try and do what I've been doing to other opponents who have got 0 jiu-jitsu. And what happens? 2 minutes into the fight, he just gives away his neck and he taps immediately. He's like, no, I don't want none of this. He didn't even look like he tried to get out of it. He was like, done, finished. Just get in the bin because he was like, he had no idea what to do. And this is why I'm saying that this Victor Petrino guy, if he just stuck to striking, he could be dangerous in the division, but he doesn't. So I worry for that guy, like, long term. But for Smith, honestly, I know he won that fight. He's like, oh, to all the haters and all them type of guys, oh, all the online trolls saying I'm losing and I'm finished. But he is finished. He did not look good in that fight. People, like, is he acting like he just won that fight in terms of, like, he was putting in a good performance? No, he put in a bad performance, but then got a good submission, which then leads to it in his brain being a good performance because he won. But deep down, if you don't look at that submission on the feet, bad. Like, if Petrino just stayed on the feet, he would have knocked him out. He would have. And now he's going to get this false confidence. And if he has another fight in the UFC against a half-decent striker, he's going to get sparked. So the fight I want to see with Anthony Smith next is Nikita Krylov or Bogdan Guskov. I know I said he should have fought someone else, Guskov, but the realistic one that makes sense is Nikita Krylov. If you get through that and you don't look bad, maybe I'll change my mind. If you have like a Glover transformation and end up coming back and improving. But in my opinion, I don't see that happening. I see Nikita Krylov knocking him out in the first round because he will not make dumb decisions. He knows how to grapple. Actually, I'll change that. Like, he has made some low IQ fight moves in the past, like with Paul Craig. But I can trust. I don't know if I can, but he should beat Anthony Smith if they fought. But that is the fight that it was a good one to make. It should have happened before. I'm surprised it hasn't happened. And if he can win that, he's put himself back in the mix again, even though I think he's washed. But for Petrino, he's not even ranked. I think he should look at a fight with Kennedy and Chukwueze, or if you don't want to do Kennedy and Chukwueze, an Iron Kutalaba, but Iron Kutalaba, just move down to middleweight. I'm sick of saying that. So we'll just go with Kennedy and Chukwueze. That's the type of fight I want to see. But after that poor performance against Oven St. Peru, probably won't even happen. Right, Michel Pereira versus Iho Potieria. Pereira is just one of the best things that's happened to the middleweight division in terms of entertainment for a division that's been boring for years, which has only just grown recently, in probably the last year or so. This guy is going to make his run to the top. He ain't going to become champion, I don't think, but he can definitely make it into the rankings. He has just steamrolled Iho Potieria. You know it's bad when a fighter's emoting on you in a fight. Like, when your opponent's doing a backflip, like, he drops him with a jab, like, his power at middleweight is so much better than at welterweight because he doesn't have to cut all the weight, lose a bit of that power, and get, like, gassed out. Like, he's doing what he was doing early in welterweight, but doing it at middleweight, and it makes me cringe when I see that he lost to Tristan Connolly, and somehow Diego, what was his name? Oh, I've forgotten him, the one who went crazy. You know who I'm on about. But honestly, Michel Pereira, he needs to have a step up. If you're not going to give him a ranked opponent, give him Chao Borralho, because they've both come off wins. Borralho looks like he's going to be a very hard fighter to stop, coming out of Fighting Nerds. He doesn't have to grapple. He's one fighter who I think's got decent fight IQ. Like, honestly, because a lot of people... Well, not a lot of people, but I thought he might have went out there against Paul Craig and tried to grapple. But before I talk about that, I think that's a fight that has to be made. Because Michel Pereira, I don't think you can just steamroll a guy like Borralho like that. Like, Pretoria has been known as kind of a weak chin. I know they're a heavier weight class. Like, he fought a light heavyweight. He's come down to middleweight. But to be fair, he hasn't even looked that good. He beat that guy who was just static, couldn't walk. No, he couldn't even, like, walk him down and do what he wanted to do. And you saw him doing, like, capoeira kicks in that fight. You can't do that against Pereira. He looked shocked when that happened. And for the people saying it was a DQ, he's a very lucky guy, and I'm glad it won a DQ. I don't think it was. It was close, because it landed on, like, the shoulder, the collarbone. If he had done that backflip and landed an inch to the right, and he landed on the head, he would have bottled his fight purse. But thank God he didn't, because... he deserved that win. Too good for Iho Potieria. The guy, I believe he emoted on Shogun Rua, even though he got clipped early in that fight against Shogun Rua, even though he was washed up and finished at that point. But yeah, for me, Pereira needs to fight either a Borralho or a guy much higher ranked, maybe even top 10. Right, and for Iho Potieria, I believe he needs to fight Rodolfo Vieira. He has been given way too many strikers. I want to see him come up against a grappler. Rodolfo Bellotto mixed up a bit of grappling, but he's a bit of, like, both. But I want him to fight against a pure grappler in Rodolfo Bellotto, because his striking won't compete with a guy like Iho Potieria, even though I don't rate his striking. But the power of him could be a problem. And I believe that's a good matchup, because if Rodolfo Vieira gets him down, then the fight's pretty much over, because his jiu-jitsu's just that elite. And Iho Potieria can be taken down, but it's all about when does he get the takedown, and can he get the takedown early? Because if not, if he gets touched on the chin by a guy like Iho Potieria, I don't think he can eat it, even though I think he's got a good chin. I think that's one guy who's got the power to knock him out. But that is a good fight for me. Paul Craig versus Borralho. Right, this fight here was just written in the stars to happen. In no world does Borralho lose to Paul Craig. Unless, and I say unless, he brings it down to the ground. And Paul Craig tried to, but at the end of the day, Paul Craig I like him and stuff because his style's entertaining to watch. Like, he's something different, but he is just awful. He really is. I'm sorry to say, if he can't get you down, then he can't do anything but spam a head kick or like a kick to the body, but then leave his chin wide open, which is why when he throws the head kick, he like kind of puts his hands out in front of him to block, but then lifts up his chin as he does that, and then opens up these positions to get countered. And Borralho knew this, so he just kept jabbing him in the face. He wasn't overcommitting to the point where he was going to be off balance and give away his back or anything. He fought that fight so smart. So for Borralho, I said who he should have fought. Michel Pereira. And yeah, that's the only fight option I'm going to give him. I think that's a good one. Or if you want to push him at ranked up, he wants a Jared Cannonier, but I think he's still just above Borralho in terms of who he deserves as an opponent. So if Borralho really wants an opponent, I know it wouldn't be fair on Brendan Allen because he fights up a lot, but maybe even a Brendan Allen would be interesting. But I think Brendan Allen wants to look at fighting further down, and that's only fair at this point. So maybe a Chris Curtis against Borralho would be interesting. So I wouldn't mind seeing that. But for Paul Craig, I have no opponent left for him anymore. He'll have another fight because he always does, but it's probably the end. He's got no chin. The only fights where he's going to have a chance in is a fight where a guy wants to bring it down to the ground. So you know what? You know how I said Potieria to fight Rodolfo Vieira? I've changed my mind, actually. Paul Craig against Rodolfo Vieira would be interesting, but I believe Rodolfo Vieira should win it because his jiu-jitsu is so much better, but I believe Paul Craig actually might try and strike more than grapple in a fight with him because he knows how elite his jiu-jitsu is. Like, Paul Craig's got good MMA jiu-jitsu, but Rodolfo Vieira's got proper, like, good jiu-jitsu competing at tournaments jiu-jitsu. Paul Craig's is for MMA. So I think that would be an interesting fight as well. Or retire, honestly. He can't fight any more power punches. Joanderson Brito versus Jack Shaw. Jack Shaw let me down in that fight a lot. Brito just looked on point again. And it was one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. Like, he throws a leg kick and I believe a bit of the nail from the kick to the leg has split open the shin. And not just that. Think about all the kicks he landed. Jack Shaw's got to condition them shins. Like, look at Wonderboy Thompson's video when he's showing you about, like, just hit it with like a bar, condition your shins, not aggressively and smash your shins up, but, you know, condition them. Because that's going to be an injury that will put him out for, if it's a broken leg, he's going to be out for a while. Maybe another 5 months to 6 months now. And he's already inactive as it is. It's just putting his career in a weird spot at this point. And Brito just looks like he keeps thriving. And he can't stop but just beg for that Dan Ige fight. And I think that fight's got to happen. He's asked for it before. He was saying, swearing and everything. Everyone thought he was swearing at Dana White at one point, but he wasn't. He just wanted to fight Dan Ige. Just give him that fight, please. Jack Shaw, no opponent, because he's going to be out for a long time. I can't give you one at middleweight. Honestly. Not middleweight, featherweight. I can't give you one. I really can't, because he don't deserve the ranked opponent now. He's going to have to fight an unranked when his career has had a massive switch. Ever since he got hit with that overhand by Ricky Simone, his career has just gone downhill, in my opinion. Because Makwan Amirkhani, although he won that fight, you have to win that fight. Otherwise, we're starting to question you. And even in that fight, he looked quite bad earlier on, and he's not the quickest starter. His boxing's all right, but he looked weak in the clinch. The thing where I thought he would be better at against Brito, he was weaker in. Because he was getting held up against the cage. He couldn't really reverse him, and when he did, he'd get reversed again. Maybe Brito's just stronger than him. And Jack Shaw didn't want it to finish there, but it had to. That looked way too bad. There's a hole in your leg, and you got the doctor put his finger inside of your leg. That don't look normal. So yeah, I can't think of an opponent for Jack Shaw. I can't. Right, I hate pronouncing the name because I can't do it. But M.Y. Kitabek versus M.Y. Tabek Orolbai versus Elvis Brener. Orolbai looks like Rinat Vikarikanov of lightweight. Because he applies a lot of pressure. He's got a good right hand that carries power, just like Rinat does, like he sparked Kevin Lee. Orolbai can wobble you. He was wobbling Elvis Brener all over the place. But the only issue I have is the pace he pushes, he could not do that in a 5-round. If he had a 5-round fight against Elvis Brener, that could easily become a draw. It really could have, because there was already talk of it being a draw because he grabbed onto the cage, which was quite a tactical foul to do, because he knew that he got a 10-9 in the round. He might have thought to himself, maybe I got a 10-8, because he was like, when I talk about domination, it was pure. I don't think it was a 10-8, it was a 10-9, but he might have thought that in his head. Like, he just absolutely just outworked him. Cross, shooting in on the leg. Like, even when it looked like Elvis Brener was getting out and trying to, like, scoop out with his feet, he would still hold that grip and try and lift him up and try and take him down. And that made it hard for a guy like Elvis Brener to deal with, because he already had a horrible weight cut. You're even hearing people, nothing wrong with it, by the way. Right, there's nothing wrong with it. Like, just go to Elvis Brener's weight cut. You were having people in the comments say that it was gay or something. And that's how hard it was for him to deal with the weight cut. And he looked drained in the cage as well when he was fighting. He just looked tired. And even when he got the back, Orolbai's got some great reversals. And you can see why this guy, his only loss was to that one Russian guy I showed in the predictions. And I can see why, because he looks so good. And he can go far in this division. Please don't feed a guy like Tony Ferguson this opponent, because he will get slept unconscious. Orolbai, I think he's one more win off getting a ranked opponent. So the fight that I'd want to see with a guy like Orolbai is a Joel Alvarez or a Guram Kutateladze. I'd favour the Guram Kutateladze fight more, because I believe now we're at the point with Joel Alvarez where he deserves a ranked opponent. So if you're not going to do Joel Alvarez, I think it only makes sense to do a fight with Guram Kutateladze. Not Kutateladze, but Kutateladze. You fought Elvis Brener. He was coming back from staph infection. Usually, he is on point. He's fast, he's sharp. He can defend takedowns. He can grapple himself. He can reverse positions. And that's why I think Guram against Orolbai would be a very interesting fight. Like, if you could put that on like a UFC 3, whatever you want to put it on, maybe 306, maybe anything, that is a very good fight to make, because you've got Orolbai is going to be using pressure. You're going to have a guy like Guram Kutateladze who's light on the feet, always moving. It's going to be hard to just keep shooting in on him and having good success. Like you saw against Demir, he struggled. He couldn't just ragdoll him in that fight. And Demir, his grappling defense isn't great, but offensively he can do it at times. And I'm not just saying that because he's Russian either. So yeah, for Elvis Brener, the type of fight I'd want to see, they wouldn't do it. Paddy Pimblett's going to have a ranked opponent next, probably. So we can't look at that fight. But a fight we could have with Elvis Brener is probably, I'm not even joking, Jim Miller. That would be interesting. Jim Miller against Elvis Brener if he still wants to fight, which he probably will. Drakkar Klose versus Joachim Silva. If fight IQ was a thing, Drakkar